This has been the looming event ever since Russia invaded Ukraine, and I just wanted to share my own thoughts on if I think China will attack Taiwan, because this week there was a ton of reports that were saying that that's going to happen apparently in June, and they just recently did a massive demonstration where they completely encircled the Taiwanese island. So it's hard to say because there's a number of factors that are going on. I mean, I have heard that with China's depopulation that's kind of happening right now, as China continues to lose more and more in terms of people every single year, that they only have they only have a window of time if they want to be able to do it with enough, maybe not enough, but with a good amount of military-aged men. And although the Navy is kind of a big factor in invading, they're going to have to do a massive naval invasion in order to even be able to do it. But anyways, the projections are saying that it would need to happen within the next 5 years. First of all, the average Chinese citizen is already, I think, in their 40s. So that's a little bit of a concern because their population is getting older and older. I don't know how much that is really going to matter because their Navy and their Air Force is going to play such a big role. Yeah, you will need bodies. They probably will need troops, boots on the ground. But that's probably the least of their concerns. Do I think they will invade? The thing is, it's a little bit concerning because of how much chaos has happened in the last, since we've entered the 2020s. There's been so much chaos, obviously in Israel, obviously in Russia and Ukraine. So at this point, I feel like nothing would really surprise me. If they were to do it in June, I don't think I'd necessarily be surprised because the whole world's been in chaos. You also have smaller things that are happening too with Armenia and Azerbaijan. We've had a civil war in Myanmar for a while now. There's some sort of there's proxy wars and shadow wars happening in Africa with Russia and former French colonial territory. So it wouldn't be really surprising if they were to do it. And it just would be, I've also heard, and there's background information about how Taiwan is one of the biggest producers of chips and chips for computers. And we really need that. The U.S. really needs that sort of stuff. And if China were to take all that over, that would be a problem. If there would be an attack, another thing to keep in mind is the American election, which I'm sure the Chinese are thinking about, which is going to be in November. So if they were to attack in June, then, that would give them some time here. If they wanted to squeeze out a very quick, I don't know how quickly they really think they can do it. I was just reviewing over Taiwan's military and how many men they have in their military. They have over 100,000 men in their military. They have a good amount of spending. All of China's neighbors have a pretty good amount of spending because they kind of have to because the looming threat of China. Now, this is not to say that Taiwan would be able to defend itself. I don't believe Taiwan would be able to defend itself any easier than Ukraine, for instance. I think Ukraine has had a much better chance at defending itself against Russia because Ukraine is right next to a bunch of allies. Europe doesn't want to see Ukraine fall, so they're right next to Poland, and they border so many European countries that are especially in NATO. So it's very easy for them to get supplies and things like that, whereas Taiwan is literally an island in the middle of the ocean. Yes, there is the United States Navy, and yes, there's allies that don't want to see Taiwan fall, like South Korea and Japan and even the Philippines, but there's no direct land border, So if China encircles that island, I don't really know what's going to happen. So at risk of me making a projection here, a prediction that is going to go horribly, do I think they are going to do it? I'm going to be honest. I'm a somewhat of a nothing ever happenser. Somewhat. I do think that those memes, the nothing ever happens movement, is obviously dumb, and they've been proven wrong literally so many times in just the last 4 years since starting 2020. The Russian invasion, the Israeli invasion into Palestine, all that stuff literally proves that movement doesn't really matter much. But Do I think China's going to do it? I don't think so. I'm a little bit surprised at the demonstration that China did encircling the island itself, but I don't think it's going to happen in June. I think that if anything, China has been trying to diplomatically get a little bit closer to the U.S., in my own personal opinion, especially with Xi Jinping's, when he went to San Francisco in California, he made an appearance there. Usually his words have been, I feel like, trying to lessen tensions. China's dealing with a lot of economic issues, and that's another reason why a lot of experts in this field are predicting that China's going to attack now, because they are kind of declining a bit. Only in terms of population, and they're having severe economic issue, especially with real estate. Everything that I've read about, it's like if the average Chinese citizen, which, I mean, to be fair, in the past, China's population just continued to explode and explode and explode. So the average Chinese citizen, they all invested their money in real estate. Like, everyone's just basically all in on real estate, which is very interesting because it does make a lot of sense. You live in China, the most popular place on earth, which has been like that for a very long time. You continue to see birth rates, the birth rate's been high, so much so that they had to do the one-child policy. So if I'm a Chinese citizen, yeah, especially living in the 70s and the 80s and even the 90s, like, I'm going to think that this population boom is going to go on forever. So I'm going to buy real estate thinking that in the future, someone's eventually going to live in this house because, yeah, there's just more and more Chinese people. But now that China's population is on the decline, what are you going to do with that real estate? And that's why there's so many empty cities, and it looks like those empty cities are only going to get more and more emptier. There's been reports since 10 years ago about these massive empty buildings. Well, those probably are going to stay like that, unless for some reason China just lets in a whole bunch of immigrants. But I don't see that. I don't see that they're going to do that. Asia's been facing depopulation in a completely different way. They can't just enact policies like Europe is and the U.S. is in terms of immigration. So they're struggling with the real estate, and that's been my guess of why China's been a little bit more diplomatic. They've been playing a little bit more of a diplomatic game because they are facing internal issues. COVID apparently hit them really hard. So anyways, my projection is they won't attack in June, and they probably won't attack within the next year. I'm not going to be able to make predictions. I just shouldn't make predictions. Also, I should say within the next year. I don't want to say that either. Within the next 6 months. I would lean towards a no overall. If they're going to do it in general, I would lean towards a no overall, like in the next 5 years. But I don't want to make that because that's very easy for me to come out as wrong. Right now, the June reports, that seems like a very likely no. And within the next 6 months, it's going to be a very likely no. It's going to really depend on, who wins. A lot of the world is very interested in who's going to be the new U.S. president. It's very interesting because the American election is probably the only election where the entire world watches. It's very easy for the U.S., especially a lot of the U.S. public, to not care about who's the president of who. If I told you, that Mexico has its elections in a week, do you know how many Americans would actually know that? None of the Americans know that. They literally going to have their election, depending on when this video comes out, in the next couple days. It might actually come out when the Mexican presidential election comes out, or is happening. I feel like we only hear about the results. We don't hear about the election process. But when it comes to American politics, the entire world, the Middle East, Europe, Asian countries, Africa, obviously Latin America, they all are watching and seeing, who, because there's so much power that is, America still has, obviously. So whether Biden wins or Trump wins, the U.S. is, the world is watching very carefully. So that's why I really don't want to make any predictions on this, because it's going to depend on who wins. But there is a window of time. If I was China, there is a window of time that I would strike Taiwan before the elections. But man, would you really want to start that chaos? And another question that I really wonder is, would the U.S. actually back Taiwan? They've been giving their word for so long, and if for some reason they don't, if for some reason if the U.S. does just let Taiwan fall, what is that going to do to all of the other alliance members that the U.S. has? Not only NATO, but Australia and New Zealand and the Philippines and Japan and South Korea. If we just let Taiwan fall without anything, that is going to really make us look like we aren't going to back up our words with anything. Our words mean nothing. And that could lead to diplomatic chaos. So we probably need to do a little bit of something. I don't know. I don't know if the U.S. We'll see. That might be a really messy situation, because I don't think the U.S. is going to want to completely escalate. If China goes in 100% and just boom, guns blazing without holding anything back, which I doubt they would do that. I think they would maybe tiptoe in. Like the way, I don't think they would do it in the Russia strategy where Russia went full in. Remember those maps when Russia was first invading Ukraine and it was just like all of Ukraine was being invaded from all different sides? I don't think they would do that with Taiwan. I think they would maybe try to tiptoe in, and then the U.S. would try to tiptoe in. But in this scenario, if China just went boom, they try to knock out Taiwan as quickly as possible, I think the U.S. wouldn't also go 100% in, guns blazing. I think they would try to find a middle ground. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I really don't. This is a complete guess. There's definitely people that would be able to tell you, probably in the U.S. Navy, better than me, but that's just my guess. At least in the way that they've been handling the Israel situation, that's what they've kind of been doing. I feel like they've tried to go pretty all in on helping Ukraine. So it's an interesting situation. Obviously, if Taiwan is being attacked by China, then it's straight up pretty much just the U.S. It is all just us, because I mean, yeah, Europe's going to help, but it's going to have to mainly be us because we have the strongest Navy. So it's an interesting situation. I'm going to say no, it won't happen, but we're going to see, and I might come to eat those words.